Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good morning to you wherever you may be. Welcome to the Big Speak webinar. This is Facilitating Humanity, Utility of the Network with Marcus Collins. I'm Marianne Kuga, Marketing Manager at Big Speak, bringing you week 5 of our webinar series. So it's been almost a month since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic, and many, including us at Big Speak, have been feeling the effects for even longer. And last week I was definitely feeling pretty melancholy, and don't get me wrong, I'm still struggling through this with everyone else. But I thought I'd share a few things that have made me smile over the past couple of weeks. So first is Some Good News with John Krasinski. If you haven't seen it, go to somegoodnews.com, which is really just a YouTube channel where actor John Krasinski, who you might recognize as Jim Halpert from The Office, hosts a news broadcast filled with, spoiler alert, good news. It's funny, it's heartwarming, and there is a segment about 10 minutes into the second episode that I have watched over and over. Also, Chef Jose Andres has a Twitter series called Recipes for the People, where he speed cooks meals with his daughters, trying to finish the recipes in the duration of songs from the musical Hamilton. And not only do you get to see him sing and dance around his kitchen, but you also get a great recipe to try. His Twitter handle is at Chef Jose Andres. And finally, the boss that thought she would cheer up her team on a video call by using an effect that turned her into a potato and then could not figure out how to turn it off. So she spent the entire meeting as a potato. If you Google boss stuck potato, it'll come up, and maybe it's the weeks in isolation getting to me, but it continues to make me laugh. All right, I think I've stalled long enough to give everyone a chance to sign in. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to introduce our guest today, Marcus Collins. Marcus is a marketing expert, brand strategist, and the former head of digital strategy for Beyonce. He currently studies the effects of cultural contagion on consumer behavior as a marketing professor at the Ross School of Business at University of Michigan. Now, before I hand it over to Marcus, just a couple of quick reminders. You can submit questions via the button on the toolbar at any time, and we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of the presentation. And you can also use the chat function to send messages to me if you have any comments. And yes, the session is being recorded and will be automatically distributed to all of you tomorrow. All right, Marcus, you want to pop on video here? There
Hello
he is.
there.
All right. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to turn my video off, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be with you all today. My name is Marcus Collins. You probably know that already by now. I get this thing to work here. Yeah. So my name is Marcus Collins, and I couldn't be more thrilled about being with you. So as Miranda mentioned, I'm a professor at the Ross School of Business, the University of Michigan, where I study social contagion within cultures of consumption. And as well as being an academic, I spend a lot of my time as a practitioner, from advertising to music marketing to startup world and kind of everything in between. And over the course of my career, I've had a chance to work with a lot of different brands from a lot of different industries, getting an understanding of how do people consume and how do we create experiences in the world, both the physical world and the online world, that get people to move. And while I'm proud of all of those things, the thing that I'm most proud of that brings me joy are my two little girls, Georgia and Ivy, who I love dearly. Okay, so that's me. That's enough about me. Let's talk about the topic for today. And we're going to talk about facilitating humanity by activating or tapping into the network of utility. And for me, this is all about providing perspective. I'm a firm believer that things aren't the way they are, things are the way that we are. That is, the way we see the world ultimately informs the way we behave in the world. So if we calibrate our worldview, then we calibrate how we show up and how we behave. And look, the world it's a different place right now, right? As Bob Dylan once said, the times they are a-changing, and Bob ain't never lied. Absolutely right. There's change all around us in these unprecedented times. And I don't need to give you the spiel because you're reading it, you're experiencing it, you're seeing it, you're hearing it, it's everywhere. But while there's change abound in every facet of our lives nowadays, it seems like there's one thing that is consistent, and that's you and me. That's us. Right? While all these changes are happening, the human race is still the human race. We are still who we are. And though changes happen abound, we are still bound by the confines, the constraints of what it means to be human, how we cognate and how we behave. Here, take this for example. So if you look at the rapid acceleration of the pathogen COVID-19 spreading in the population of the United States, things really start to kind of tick up right in kind of early March, right after the first week of March. And I know this very well because the first week of March, my family and I, we were in Turks and Caicos living our best life, right? We were just killing it on the beach, having a grand old time, no issues at all. And we got back to the States on March 8th. And I remember thinking about this very clearly as I thought about what I talk about today. On March 8th, these were the trending topics on Twitter. That is, this is what everybody was talking about. This is the top of the cultural zeitgeist on March 8th. It was International Women's Day, which we're celebrating. We were applauding Kate McKinney doing her spot-on rendition or impression of Elizabeth Warren. Right, we're celebrating Yugani's birthday. He's a Chinese basketball player. We were bemoaning the issues of daylight savings, and we were playing an online game about board games and sex. Like, that's what life was. You fast forward roughly 2 weeks later, and all the conversations on Twitter had everything to do with coronavirus, right? From our unwillingness to sacrifice our lives for the sake of the economy, the lockdown that's experiencing, a drug that was being associated with a fish tank cleaner, all these issues. This was at the height of conversations roughly 2 weeks after my return back from Turks and Caicos. But then you fast forward roughly 2 weeks after the 24th, and our conversations are again back about things that are happening in the cultural zeitgeist, right? Rocket Power, which is from a Nickelodeon show, WrestleMania or Raw after WrestleMania, and Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, right? So I see this, and I think this is so fascinating because what it tells me is what we know from statistics, is that while there are extremities that happen on the plus and minus side, things always tend to regress to the mean, right? Though we live in these extreme hyperbolic state, somehow or another, we always regress to the mean, to the normal. And by the normal, I mean the standard. That is what is typical, the status quo. So in a world now where business is anything but status quo, we regress to the mean of being normal humans. And that's what I want to dig into today. What does it mean to be human? And how do we take this notion of what it means to be human to inform how we should behave in today's world where things seem to be so abnormal? So what does it mean to be human? I love the quote that Aristotle wrote. It's this, that man by nature is a social animal. That is, we are by our very nature, our very makeup, tribal by nature. Right? We are meant to be connected. Right? Anthropologists would argue that the reason why we as a species were able to evolve and to rise up the food chain is our ability to cooperate, our ability to connect. We're social animals by nature, and we do everything we can to connect to one another, to be connected to our people. That's why the notion of solitary confinement is considered cruel and unusual punishment when done at a long stint of time, because us being separated from people is so inhuman. It's so not who we are. In fact, we'll pay a premium just to be close to people, right? We've got beer in the refrigerator, yet let's go meet for a drink at the bar. Like, this is what we're designed to do, to come together. Why? Because we rely on each other for everything. We rely on each other. It's how we evolved our ability to connect. We rely on each other for everything. We learn better from each other. Right? It's referred to as social learning. Alex Pullen puts it this way, that all the group members make better decisions than we would have individually when we operate from social intelligence, right? From us gleaning insight and knowledge from people around us, right? You see this all the time happening on social networking platforms. right? You know, I'm thinking about doing a thing. What do you think? What's your take? What's your opinion? Anybody have any feedback for me? We ask our friends, we ask our people, our networks of people for advice so we can make better decisions. Right? The social learning, the social intelligence allows us to make better decisions. Not only do we make better decisions from our people, but we also have more power with people. Think about collective bargaining and unions. Unions enable groups of people to leverage our collective powers in an effort to get more utility, to get better benefits. Not only are we smarter because of our networks of people, not only do we have access to more things because of our networks of people, but we actually live longer because of our networks of people. In fact, there was research that was done in Sardinia that saw that the average lifespan of this community, the people who live in this island, was 100 years old. It's like, wow, that's pretty fascinating. And researchers were curious to know, well, why is this the case? What is it about the people on this island living here? What is it about their livelihood that makes them have them live as long as they do? And of course, the normal hypotheses were, well, maybe they exercise more, or maybe they walk more, or maybe it's their diet, or maybe they don't smoke, or these things that we typically tend to associate to longer life. And what the research revealed at this point shouldn't be such a surprise, but it was fascinating to the researchers that had nothing to do with those things, those what conventional wisdom would tell us leads to better health and longer life. But it was about our social interactions, our close relationships, our dependency on our people, our networks of people allows us to live longer, right? Not only are we smarter, not only do we have access to more things, but we have longer life. One philosopher, Rogerts Nelson says it this way: dearly beloved, we've gathered here today to get through this thing called life. We depend on our people. The Beatles said it best: we get by with a little help from our friends. We rely on people because this is how we survive. In our mind, social connection means survival. It means long life. Social connection means that we can trust, right? And these things bring tons of benefit with it, right? We hunt in packs. We do things together, right? Road trips aren't as fun when we're doing it by ourselves. When we're with other people, it's much more joyous. This is the utility of the network. And we do everything we can to not only crash together to other people, but also to groom the network. We see this happen in primates like chimpanzees and apes. They literally groom each other in an effort to strengthen the bonds between the people within the network, within their tribe, within their clan. Right? We literally do these things where it may not be grooming hair like we will with our children, but with our friends and our families, our teammates, fraternity brothers, sorority sisters, our people, we groom the relationship through things like TikTok challenges at the moment. Right? People are doing TikTok challenges as currency of the network to spread with their people so that other people can join in, and this exchange that's happening between each other are bringing people closer together, right? You see this happening all over the place. Not only that, but you think about the games that they play. We see right now the rocket power was trending on April 6th, right? This came from a game. Someone said, pick 3. And people joined in the conversation of the 9 options here. Which show do you go with, right? These games that we play, these challenges that we pose to our people, we're doing these things in an effort to tighten the relationships of our network, right? If you need any other piece of evidence here, it has to be Joe Exotic. Everyone's watching Tiger King because these conversations allow us to connect with our people. When everybody's watching it, we want to watch it too, so that we feel that we're a part of it. This is the way in which we groom the network. This is the way in which we come together, that we tighten the bonds of our relationships. And not only do we see this in how primates like apes groom their relationship, we also think about it, we see it in the perspective of like alpha males. Right? We think about alpha males, that they're the alpha, they're the biggest, they're in charge, they are the dominant forces within a collective, right? Within a network. But the reason why they're alpha has nothing to do with their size. It has everything to do with their commitment to the coalition, right? They understand that the unity is the absolute essential for the coalition to survive, right? they're sacrificing themselves for the benefit of the network. We think about this in human terms when it comes to politics, right? In politics, and we're right in the middle of election season, so we know this clear and present, that in the primaries, Democrats beat up on other Democrats and Republicans beat on other Republicans, and they totally hate each other. But once the primaries are over, they come together for the sake of the network, for the sake of the community. In the extreme moments, we always tend to regress to the mean, to regress to the normal, to be back to ourselves. What I think is really interesting about this is that before we found ourselves locked down, practicing social distancing from a physical perspective, quarantining ourselves in some cases, and seeing loved ones struggle, we had needs before we got here. Right? We wanted a new pair of shoes, or we had to go on a vacation, or I had to do these things. There were needs that we have. But we find ourselves in these extreme moments, these needs have now become superfluous. They don't matter as much. But what does matter is our people. Right? I'm from Detroit, and I live in Ann Arbor, which is close to Detroit. And this is what Detroit looks like right now. Right? It's barren. Right? And in moments when things seem to be so hyperbolic, those needs no longer exist, which is interesting for a market because we spend a lot of time thinking about need-based segmentation, and we segment our products and services based on the needs that people have. But the truth of the matter is what we really need is you and I. It's us, each other. This is how we are designed. And it's interesting when you take this a step further, you think about Abraham Maslow, who wrote the paper about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, that there are needs that humans rely on to feel fulfilled. At the bottom, we absolutely need psychological needs, shelter, food, clothing, right? Then there are safety needs that we need to have. And then once we achieve safety needs, we now move up into belonging, love, social needs, then esteem, and then self-actualization. But the interesting part about this is that if you press against this a little bit further, even in Maslow's brilliance, you will see that we will prioritize socialization over health, over our safety needs, right? We'll do things that put us in peril before this time. You'd stay out a little too late than you normally would. You drink more than you normally would. You go cliff diving because all the other people around you are going cliff diving. And we do these things so that we feel connected with our people. That is, our safety becomes a secondary criteria to our socialization. This is unbelievably powerful. We are social animals by nature, and we do everything we can to connect. And this connection, this network effect that comes from us being connected to our people provides tons and tons of utility. Now, this of course begs the question, so how do we tap into this utility? How do companies tap into this utility? How do politicians, organizations, institutions, we as citizens of this world, how do we tap into the utility of the network? What are the creative ways by which we can do that? So to answer that question, we should probably look at where creativity and innovation is abundant. And one would argue that here in the States, it's Silicon Valley, right? This is Apple is there, Facebook, Google, all these places that the epicenter of innovation in this country, I would say probably descends here in Silicon Valley. And I remember reading an article some years ago about what informs Silicon Valley in regards to the companies that are acquired. That is, I'm Google and I want to acquire a new company. What are the things that inform the companies that they acquire? And at first glance, the status quo for me was like, well, they probably acquire where there's the best technology. They probably acquire because the talent who made the technology is good, so you want to retain that talent, or they have access to more data, all these things that seem very functional. And while that made the list for sure, there was something I had no intention on seeing, no expectancy this reveal itself. And it was said to be that what informs what companies get acquired, it's due to what's referred to as the toothbrush test. My first time ever hearing it, the toothbrush test. And Larry Page, one of the co-founders of Google, says it this way. The toothbrush test is Is it something that people will use once or twice a day? And does it make life better? It's something you use more than once or twice a day. But more importantly, does it make your life better? And I saw that and I thought it was just so profound, because essentially what it's saying is that at the epicenter of creativity, the epicenter of innovation, what informs the innovations that they go acquire are the innovations, the ideas, the creative overtures that identify points of friction and relieve them. They identify points of friction that people have, and they relieve those points of friction. It's such a really simple provocation. We identify points of friction and relieve them. Passing the toothbrush test. Because I'm a marketer, particularly spent a lot of time working in advertising. And advertisers were always thinking about, what's the big idea? We need a really big idea, huge, gargantuan idea. And what this is telling us, at least what this is suggesting to us, is that the big idea really isn't that big in nature. That the big ideas, as David Ogilvy would say, are usually simple ideas. They identify points of friction and relieve them. It's a simple idea, but when done, the impact is massive. The impact is big. So how then would one do that? How do we come up with ideas, innovations that identify points of friction and relieve them in an effort to connect people together? How do we do that? Well, we look at creative problem solvers. There was some research that was done that looked at the companies who were super creative, that is being recipients of Cannes Lion Awards. So they were the agency of the year for Cannes Lions, which is the huge festival for the advertising creative industry. It's like the Oscars for advertising. Cannes Lion Award winners, Effie Award winners, the CMO of the year companies for Cannes Lions, that those companies outperform the S&P year over year over year, right? So these companies that are creative by nature, right, or creativity is of how they solve problems, outperform the S&P every year, right, which is remarkable. And when examined further on what makes those companies so creative, that is, what are the characteristics that inform or that dictate the ideas they come up with, it was this. Those companies identified a point of friction, that is, they had a cause that they were getting behind, and instead of talking about it, they did it. They found where people had issues, they found where there was an issue, a cause, and they took action against it. They identified a point of friction and relieved it. They found issues that people have, and instead of talking about it, they actually did it. And this, to me, couldn't be more pressing than it is today. Because as we know, we're in this unprecedented situation at the moment. And we see companies that are still acting like it's a normal day, right? I've been receiving emails from the dry cleaner that I used 12 years ago telling me all the precautions they're doing for COVID-19. I'm like, I don't even know who you are. Like, we don't have a relationship. How can you act like things are just kind of status quo? Right? I get emails from companies like J. Crew saying, "Hey, come check out our new spring line." I'm like, I'm not thinking about buying clothes at the moment. Like, that's not what's on my mind. So we see companies that are acting like things are normal in an abnormal situation that only help drive their bottom line, drive revenue for themselves. We look at it as it feel like it's completely out of step. And you juxtapose this that's happening here to companies like Carhartt, who have stopped production on their normal products and started to create ventilators and masks because people are in need, identifying points of friction and relieve them. Diageo and Anheuser-Busch, while they're creating product, have dedicated their production line to creating hand sanitizer to help people, free hand sanitizer, identifying points of friction and relieve them. The CEO of Zoom, once universities moved to an off-site configuration, that is, classes were happening online as opposed to in the physical space. He opened up Zoom so that everyone in higher education and in primary and secondary education have free access to Zoom and its full capabilities, right? Identifying points of friction and relieving them. Uber Eats have removed their delivery fees so that people can get contact-free access to food through delivery, right? These are all massive, massive changes these companies are making in an effort to help people by identifying points of friction and relieving them. And this is the perspective that I think is worthwhile, because we find ourselves in a non-status quo situation where our companies are in jeopardy. What would normally be a revenue generator for us no longer exists. We find ourselves wondering, well, what do we do? How do we go to market in this sort of situation? And I believe that if we change our perspective, we'll see the world a little bit differently. And in doing that, we'll be able to produce new ideas, reimagining the business that we're in, and create new products, new services that help people, but also help ourselves. And we see this happening over and over and over again. Take, for instance, DJ D-Nice. So he's a DJ, used to be a rapper back in the 80s. And D-Nice decided, his business was based upon getting tons of people together, and he spins records, right? He DJs parties, big parties. And if people can't physically be together, he has no revenue. There's no income. So what did he decide to do? I'm gonna take my skill set and change my perspective. Since I can't go to a place where everyone's gonna be physically, where I can go to another place where everyone's gonna be in a zeros and ones world. And what it created a quarantine party, as it were. Went on Instagram live and hosted a party for everyone to be a part of, right? And when this party happened, he had over 84,000 people at one time tuning in. Regular people like ourselves, to Queen Latifah, Oprah, Michelle Obama, like people were showing up to this thing. I remember someone tweeted, "Last night a DJ saved my life," particularly because he was helping facilitate humanity, bringing people together. And of course, this is at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time, 84,000 people showed up, and everyone was talking about it after the fact, right? Trending topic, club quarantine with DJ D-Nice. So the next week, or the next day rather, when he did another party, 146,000 people showed up at 6:45 p.m. Why? Because we descend together. We want to be together. And understanding this, reimagining his industry, his category, and the product that he brings to market, reimagining it brings people together. It helps people, and people talk about it. A friend, Glenn Lott, is a physical trainer. And typically he'd be in a gym helping people with their health needs, right? But since he can't do that, he now hosts his workouts on Facebook Live. Now, he's not making money from this. What he's doing is establishing relationships with people by helping them, identifying points of friction and relieving them. This is how we facilitate humanity. It enables us to tap into the network of utility. I mean, the same thing is happening with me as well, right? A large part of what I do as a practitioner, it's either in the classroom, the boardroom, or on stage with gatherings of people together. And unfortunately, that can't be the case. So the first thing I thought about doing is that, well, normally I'd be talking to companies and talking to at conferences, but there's other people who probably need those things, even though those conferences aren't existing. So a friend of mine, another speaker and I, we got together and we created a small business survival webinar in the early stages on the 19th of March to help people, to help answer questions that people may have about how can they weather the storm at the moment. Not necessarily getting us to the same revenue that we had beforehand, but at least stopping the leaky bucket by focusing on people. And while I'm doing this as well, I'm also a professor. So I also teach at the University of Michigan Raw School of Business. And I was doing office hours for my students that they'll just drop in on a Zoom link. I thought, you know what, there are a lot of people who could benefit that aren't necessarily students, who couldn't physically be in my office if we were doing this. What an opportunity to help other people. So I created what I call super office hours, where I put a link on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and I invite anybody to come on in, drop on in, and we'll just have a discussion about a particular topic. Since I know I'm not the bearer of all knowledge, I bring in someone to host it with me. So every week we have these super office hours on Super Tuesdays to talk about different solutions, using marketing as a way to help people, whether they're students, small business owners, people who are business leaders trying to figure it out, and everybody in between. And this is exactly what we're doing today as well. Right? Big Speak is doing this to help, to identify points of friction and relieve it. This is how we benefit from the network. We benefit from the network by contributing to the network. This great utility that exists in who we are as human beings, we benefited from it as marketers, companies, organizations, institutions, politicians, even other human beings by contributing to it. This is the ring of reciprocity. We help by identifying points of friction and relieve it. Tony Robbins says it this way, that a relationship will only last if you see it as a place where you give, not take. We give, we bring, we help people. And not only does it help someone else, but it tightens the relationships of our networks. And as a result, we benefit. And then this is where it gets good. This is where it really gets good. So not only do we benefit from these network ties that we contribute to, but this is also the stuff that people talk about. People, I love this tweet here, it just so perfectly nails it, that people tell other people about companies and brands, not because they love the company or brand, but because they love their people. They tell their friends about what to watch, where to go, what to do, what to eat, what not to do, where not to go, where not to consume, to help their people. So the opportunities for businesses to tap into this network of utility is to help people help their people by helping people, identifying points of friction and relieving. It's a perspective that allows us to see the world differently. And as practitioners, as citizens of this world, we as a result act differently as well. You know, in business, we often use that quote, like it's business, it's never personal. And anytime I hear that quote, I hear people say that, I'm always like, what are you talking about? Of course it's personal. Business at its very core is all about people. If you don't have people, you don't have business. So it behooves us at a time where we don't have a choice but to be creative, to focus on people. We focus on people, we invest in people, they invest in us. This is how relationships are grown between companies and people, between people and people. We contribute, and as a result, we benefit, and we become a part of the ring of reciprocity. And this is an unbelievable opportunity to start right now, whether it's with your company or you as an individual. It's a perfect opportunity to start. So, how to get started? The first is this requires radical empathy, unbelievable amounts of empathy. That is, we got to put our feet inside the shoes of the network. We got to walk a mile in their shoes, as the saying goes, so that we can understand what it feels like to have pain, to understand what exactly are the points of friction, not conceptually, but because you know what it might feel. I like the way empathy is described here. The prerequisite in empathy is simply paying attention to the pain, to the person in pain. It's paying attention, understanding it, feeling it with them. And I often say that it's not enough to walk a mile in their shoes. You have to see the world through their eyes. And having this radical empathy is the first step to helping people, to contribute to the network. Because the first step requires identifying the point of friction. And that point of friction is only identified when you see the world with your eyes. So that's the first. The second, we have to broaden the myopia. There's a seminal literature in marketing by Theodore Lovett called marketing myopia. And the idea is this, his argument is this, is that businesses, particularly marketers, tend to look at their business or category through the lens of their product, right? So I am Amtrak, we make trains or we run trains. So I'm in the railroad business, I'm in the train business. I have a yoga studio, I teach yoga, therefore I'm in the yoga business, right? And we see the world through this myopic focus of the products that we create. And what Theodore Lovett would argue is that this has nothing to do with you and your products. This has everything to do with people. It is, we should think about what we do as practitioners, either as business people or as individuals in this world, not based upon the products that we create, but on the value that it provides to people. So Amex, while they do provide a train service, they're not in the railroad business, the train business, they are in the transportation business. A yoga instructor who has a yoga studio, that person is not in the yoga business, they're in the wellness business. And when we think about the world through the lens of the value that it brings to people, we can now reimagine how we create products and services based upon the widening of our aperture, removing the myopia. And once we remove the myopia, having identified the point of friction because of radical empathy, we can now reimagine our skill set so that it meets the needs of the people. We can reimagine what we do as the products we bring to market so that it meets the needs that people have. You know, I see people across the social web taking full advantage of this. So on the far left is a guy named Maurice. He's a chef. He's a personal chef. He no longer can do this. So what is he doing now? He's helping people by providing cooking classes out of his kitchen. Sophia is, she is a fitness instructor, and she can't do that right now. So what is she doing? She's helping people by providing them things they can do right now to be active. Eric on the far end here, Eric is a content creator, right? He produces content. He goes shoots film. Since he can't do that right now, he's helping other people learn how to make film, how to make content. He's helping people. And when all this is said and done, the relationships that these people will have with the network will be far greater than what it would have been if they stopped or tried other ways to sell what they normally do. Even my friend here, she's been furloughed in her job. And what she do, instead of being furloughed and kind of step away in sadness and, you know, feeling bad about herself, she said, what a great opportunity to help somebody else. How can I help? And we see these moments of humanity that brighten our, that brightens our hope and what we can do as a species. This is what we were built to do. We were designed to cooperate, to help. This is how we're able to evolve. It's what we're designed to do. And that's the perspective that I want to leave with you here. As we think about how we navigate the uncertainty of today, I tell you that the best way to navigate it is by facilitating humanity, by focusing on people, tapping into the network of utility by our ability to help, identifying points of friction and relieving them. Now, I imagine that as you hear this, you know, it's like, well, I buy some of it, but some of it I'm not really on board for, and that's totally cool. I don't expect to sell you fully in a half hour's time. What I do want to do is just slightly recalibrate the way you see the world, slightly recalibrate your lens by which you see the world, because even the smallest shift will have an impact on your behavior. Or said differently, small shifts in mindset can trigger a cascade of changes so profound that they test the limits of what seems possible. Start with your perspective. We see the world differently and we operate in the world differently. You see this in the social sciences, we see it in the literature. It is empirically true. And I challenge you to do the exact same thing. In fact, I'm so serious about that challenge that I encourage you to go out. Think about what points of friction that people have. Think about what you could do based upon their values, their needs, their wants, what they're in need of, and then how you can calibrate your skill sets, what you do to help people. And I'll tell you, I challenge you to do this because I'll tell you this, that not only will you help them, you'll help yourself. Try it for 1 week. Try it for 1 week. And then I want to hear from you. This is my email address. I want you to send an email directly to me. Give it a try and let me know how it goes for you. Consider it a social experiment. You're going to help people for a week. And I want you to come back and tell me what it meant, what you did, what it meant for you, and what changes happened, if any at all. I hope this was helpful. At the very least, I hope that this helps you see the world just a little bit differently. Thank you so much.
All right, Marcus, thank you so much. We're going to open it up for questions right now. And before we do, I just want to say, when you say go out, you really mean stay in, stay home.
Yes. Yes. I mean,
Stay home, go out, yes.
Go out in the digital world, go out in the zeros and ones world.
Yes, but also stay home. Okay, so first question, and this is actually interesting as we're talking about like doing everything virtual. So with everything going virtual and having so much screen time, do you have any tips for any non-screen connection right now? And this is huge for me as I'm on video calls. I mean, I'm sure most of us are on video calls all the time. And then afterwards, someone's like, let's have a happy hour. My family is like, let's FaceTime. And I'm like, I can't stare at my computer anymore. So what can we do?
So, you know what I've been doing, particularly for my parents, right? So my parents don't get a chance to see their grandkids as much. And, you know, they use FaceTime and all those things. So what we've been doing is we've been documenting our day. So we've been recording our day. So we do, my wife is helping the kids doing homeschooling. So we'll do music class and we'll record like a song that we made. And then we'll share with our family through a group me or through a text exchange or through an iCloud photo share. So there's those things. You can capture what you do to be consumed later. But you know, before there was the zeros and ones of the digital world we live in, there was a good plain old telephone too. Like hearing a voice, it can actually be quite helpful. You know, we've seen in Italy, for instance, you know, people were singing from their windows, right? Right down the way here in Michigan, there was a professional celloist who was on her porch playing cello for the community, right? Helping people. There's these small things that seem small, but the impact is massive, right? The big ideas are typically simple ideas. We start with just understanding people, helping people.
Definitely. Okay, so here's another one. It's great to provide services for free and surely helps build relationships and collaboration. And it works for a while, but at the end of the day, a business needs income. And it's difficult to start charging if the product or services was provided for free. So what are your thoughts on
Yes,
that?
so you're right. In some cases, it will be a challenge to turn this into a revenue positive situation. However, you know, the tech companies have done a really good job of creating what we know as freemiums. You give people a little bit of it, and if you want more, come on in, right? So you can imagine, so Glenn in his fitness training, he does it free from one time or for a weekend. He says, if you like what you saw, come on in, and you get a subscription to a live video, perhaps. And what I like about this is that, you know, it's not about us designing for the medium. Instead, it's about designing for the need, right? People still need to work out. People still want to feel like, you know, healthy and things like as much as we can. I mean, Lord knows I've gained some weight during our quarantine times. But the ability to provide a service with a small firewall, right? You wouldn't be the same margins that you had beforehand for sure, but it wouldn't be at zero. Again, this is about stopping a leaky bucket, not a full out recalibration.
Yeah, and I think that I think that there are a lot of places, like for example, like a yoga studio, or a lot of these fitness places that are like, like we're gonna. It's not expected that it's going to be free forever. You know, like
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I don't expect that my yoga studio that's doing all these really amazing online classes. I don't expect to eventually walk in there and be like, well, you used to give this to me for free. And I know like that there are various levels of that for different businesses, and that like a yoga studio is a very, and fitness is a very specific example in industry. But I think as a consumer, that because these are such extreme times, I don't think as a consumer that people expect that services that are being offered for free now are going to remain free forever.
Yeah. And I think that consumers also realize that they're doing this for my own good, like doing this for me, right? They're doing this
Mhm.
because they care. And this is the relationship part, right? It's almost like, biologically trust is trust, right? Relationships develop biologically the same way we trust people, or the same way we trust companies and organizations, right? The exact same thing. Just like you wouldn't expect your friend to come over to your house and paint your house every time you need to be painted, or help you move every time you need to move a thing. You wouldn't expect it of a friend, even though they do it a few times or once or twice. It's the same thing goes here, right? Like we know that there is a driveway, it's a runway to this sort of gratis sort of giving, and we actually appreciate it. I don't think we grow to expect it. But as far as
Mhm.
companies, though, what I think is interesting here is that as we reimagine the business that we're in and what our products that we provide are, they actually become potential innovations that we can lean into after the fact, right? So
Mhm.
like the office hours that I'm doing now, I mean, I plan to do that even when we go back to some normalcy, because it helps people, makes me feel good helping people. And this is what I'm here to do, is to serve, right? This is a
Mhm.
new thing that would never have done otherwise, right? If you look at the recession in 2009, tons of companies who came out of that recession, right? In these moments of extremity, we find creative opportunities by regressing back to the mean humanity.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. How do we reconcile the power of networks and groups to make better decisions with the well-known propensity for group decisions to be the safest, least common denominator?
Yeah, so this is the notion of like the argument of collective intelligence and like groupthink, right? So groupthink is that we all kind of see it the same way, and then therefore we kind of all run into the wall, right? The idea of collective intelligence is less of a heterogeneous perspective that everyone has. This is about diversity of perspective. The diversity of feedback allows dissenting points of view to help arrive at an optimized recommendation. So groupthink is about, everyone's saying the same thing. I'm just going to go along with the wisdom of the crowd, or the wisdom of of the primary thinking, and therefore we kind of all go in the wrong direction. Even though in the back of my mind, like, I should have never done that. But we think about the collective intelligence, social intelligence. This is about different perspectives coming together, and we can learn from each other broadly. And as the research shows, that is actually a bonus to diversity of thinking. That is, having more people with different perspectives allow us to get to better outcomes than if you have people who are more brilliant than the masses, but don't have diversity in their thinking. There's a scholar by name Scott Page who describes this as the diversity bonus. He actually created a mathematical model that describes this very thing.
Mhm. Okay. Next question. After this pandemic, will there be a new normal? Will people social distance or resume back to the way it was prior to the pandemic? And this is an interesting question because last week we had Kevin O'Leary who said he's like never going outside again. So we're just curious as to what your take was, because I'm definitely going outside again after this.
So this what's going to happen now, what I think is fascinating, what we're going to see here is a negotiation of new norms, right? So we think about culture. Culture consists of four things: the beliefs that we hold, the artifacts that have meaning, the behaviors that are normative, and the language that we use. And and what we will see is us renegotiate as a populace what is acceptable, what beliefs are acceptable, what language is acceptable, what norms, rituals are acceptable, and what artifacts are acceptable, right? So I don't imagine that we'll be wearing masks every day, right? Even after we got out of this. That's an artifact that I don't think will become unnormal. Will we go outside? Of course we will. Will people shake hands? Like that's the one that I wonder about. That maybe we may adopt a fist bump or elbow bump or a bow. They're like new norms may come out of this because of the collective belief that shaking hands seem to be primitive and it only puts us in danger. So that belief informs a new behavior. When you think about a month ago or 2 months ago, I don't think I've ever heard the words uttered social distancing. Or like it's a part of our vernacular now, right? Flattening the curve. It's a part of our lexicon, right? And that's because people adopted it, negotiated, said this is a thing that we're going to use and say in non-direct means, indirect means, and it becomes normal. When it comes to how we'll behave when we get out of this, it's probably going to be one side of the spectrum. We're either going to say, stay away from me, which I don't think is going to happen, or we're going to go embrace each other as much as we possibly can because we've been so far away. And I tend to believe that we'll be closer to the latter because this is what we're wired to do.
Yeah. What are some examples of empathy in the business world that have been inspiring you during this pandemic?
So I showed a few there. I think that Carhartt, being they're actually considered a essential company, right? They stopped production on their normal products that Carhartt was doing very well, by the way, to focus on things that were that help people. And the heroes in all this are like everyone who's on the front line. I mean, it's like when I see the medical workers, even think about this, and people who normally don't get thought about, like trash men, the people who are like providing some normalcy in such an abnormal time. I think that those things inspire me. That people are willing to risk their lives, as we saw in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to help people stay connected. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast this morning, just like a question and answer podcast, and someone had mentioned that she works in a hospital. She works admin in a hospital. She's never been in like the medical sense of things, but she's been asked to do not medical procedures, obviously, but she's been asked to do so many more things in her place in working in the hospital. And she's like, I never expected to be on the front lines of this. And it was just kind of like to think about how many people, like grocery store workers, you never expect, like, as if you're a cashier at Trader Joe's or whatever it is, you never expect to like be an essential worker on the front lines of this pandemic. And it's just mind blowing.
They're risking their lives for our groceries. It's like that's a real thing. And I think that seeing that level of humanity, it's inspiring, truthfully.
Yeah, and like Instacart, so like which I've been using, and I'm sitting there like, all right, how do I tip my driver more? Because my driver or my delivery person is literally going to the store, risking their life for me, so I don't have to. And I'm like, how do you put a price on that? It's crazy. We are gonna do one more question, and I laughed when this one came in because it's actually from my dad. Who signed in, and he would like to know what the significance of the chicken noodle soup can photo is in the background.
So I'm a big fan of pop art, particularly Roy Lichtenstein and Andy Warhol. So this is a print of Andy Warhol's famous Campbell soup montage of art, and which is supposed to be a critique on mass consumption. And as a marketer who sells, it's a bit ironic.
Right, yeah. Well, he also just mentioned, and I do remember this as a kid, that we used to, tie the two cans together with a piece of string and use that as a means of communication. So, parents or not parents out there, if you need a fun activity to do with your kids, the soup can telephone is is definitely it's a winner there, and I bet a lot of like kids these days have not seen that before.
Right.
So, and someone else just mentioned that she looks forward to people having better hygiene habits and like covering your mouth when you cough, because I know that doesn't always happen. And,
Yeah.
hand washing, lots more hand washing. Like, I mean,
It's
doesn't always
interesting.
happen.
I've seen so many videos about how to properly wash your hands, and I've realized my 40 years of living, I've been washing my hands incorrectly, apparently. Like it's like
Yeah,
the thorough nature of hand washing, I completely was missed
I
on.
know. I'm sitting there like, did I ever wash my hands for 20 seconds before this? I mean, maybe, but like maybe not. So definitely not every single time I wash my hands. So,
Yeah, for sure.
um, okay, so we're gonna stop here. Let's see. Oh, I did have a couple people ask to share the links that I mentioned in the intro, so I'll send those out with the recording. And if anyone has any further questions for Marcus, me, or anyone on the Big Speak team, please reach out. We're here to help and support you however we can. And as I said, we are recording every session, which will be automatically shared with all of you, as well as all those who registered and were unable to attend. Marcus, thank you so much for joining us. This was excellent. And on behalf of all of us at Big Speak, we really appreciate you taking the time today.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And to everyone out there in the world, thank you for being here. Next week on the Big Speak webinar, we'll be talking to Tiffany Bova, the Chief Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. And that is scheduled for the same time slot, Wednesday, April 15th at 10 a.m. Pacific. And the registration links will be sent out on Monday. And I hope we'll see you all then. Thank you all so much. Please stay home if you can. Wash your hands, 20 seconds, and take care of yourselves. And really just hang in there. All right. Bye, everyone.